So firstly, every Nightfarer is good and viable and fun. That being said, today we're going to rank all 8 Nightfarers from worst to best based on how powerful they are, their skills, lightly touch on relics, and my own personal bias. So if I rank your favorite Nightfarer as the worst, I'm totally not sorry. Let's go! The worst on this list, in my opinion, is the Guardian. Now, the Guardian does have a lot of things going for him, same as every one of these Nightfarers. For starters, he has the highest HP and stamina, and some really fantastic defensive capabilities because of that shield and that high HP and stamina. The downsides here are a couple of things. One of them being Whirlwind, that main skill that he has, is really good against trash enemies, especially when you buff it with that relic that makes it last a really long time. There's a good amount of stagger potential there. Definitely a skill that struggles on bosses because it is a stationary damage ability and bosses move around so much. And also, the Guardian's quite limited in their overall playstyle, which is arguably like one of their best strengths, but it's also is limiting because you're sort of stuck with very specific weapon sets. One being using a shield because of your passive ability, Steel Guard. You do want to use a shield because you want to be blocking a lot of damage, which also in turn means you're really only effective when enemies are actually attacking you in some regards. And then you also want to use a lot of thrust weapons for that shield poke and being able to poke through the shields. You're losing a lot of the specific parts of the Guardian's kit if you're not actually using a shield. If you aren't using a shield, I just think you should be playing Raider in my personal opinion. But his ultimate is really good. Like, I would be remiss not to touch on the fact that he has one of the best ultimates because you can revive allies instantly with it. Also has great damage potential and you can hold it for the extra like damage reduction as well. It's a fantastic skill, and like he is a good Nightfarer. Like, he's totally viable. Like, they're all viable, but someone has to go at the end of this list, and it's Guardian. Recluse is next. Now, Recluse, I do appreciate slightly more than Guardian for a couple of reasons. They have the highest intelligence and faith scaling, and this makes them just an absolutely incredible caster for both seals and staves, and there's plenty of those in the game. And this also means they're quite flexible in terms of the damage type that they're doing, because, you know, we've touched on in plenty of videos on Nightreign about how valuable it is to match an enemy, especially a boss's weakness, and doing so is a little bit easier with Recluse because of the freedom they have in terms of the staves and seals that they use, and you can sort of mix and match those. And then you can also make those magic cocktails based on how you want if you are using a lot of seals to, say, do certain damage types. But conversely, one of her best strengths being the magic cocktail is also one of her biggest weaknesses. So you've got the ability to generate FP regularly because of like building up that magic cocktail with that passive ability, right? That's why Recluse is fantastic. But also, when you actually have to use magic cocktail as like a skill, very, like, I would say maybe 3 out of 5 times you get something bad, and 2 out of 5 times you get something good. And especially in group play, it's hard to get the exact cocktail you're looking for because your allies will be using whatever weapons they're using, and getting actually the right residues off the enemies to get the right cocktails is difficult. And the other downside to that as well is that a lot of the cocktails have a really long casting window, which means you're essentially just standing there as a sitting duck while this is happening. So it's very easy to take damage during those animations, and then it's just kind of pointless because you sometimes use those ones that just aren't really giving you much value or damage or output, whatever it is, and then you've just wasted that time. But you kind of need to do that because you want those residues to generate your FP, so you're kind of stuck a little bit sometimes as Recluse. But that being said, her ultimate is fantastic. Not only does it give you HP and FP, it does it to your allies, it does a little bit of damage, it's a fantastic ability as well. But really the biggest downside to Recluse is the low amount of HP that she has, as well as only really being useful in team play. If you're trying to play solo, Recluse is definitely a challenging hero, but I do appreciate her a little bit more than Guardian because she's a bit more unique, right? Like I said with Guardian, you kind of would rather play Raider unless you're using a shield, whereas Recluse has a very specific playstyle that has a bit of flexibility and fun inside that I personally feel. And I've always been an intelligence lover in Elden Ring, so it definitely gets a little bit of a bump for that reason. Revenant is next. Now, a lot of the same feedback for Recluse is also relevant for Revenant. Very low HP. I think they both have the exact same amount of HP. Now, Revenant's interesting because you've even got less weapon options here. You've only got S face scaling. You don't have that intelligence scaling. So you're really looking for a good seal, whereas Recluse has the freedom to use both. And you also can't generate FP like the Recluse can. And being a caster, you do want a lot of FP. So you're going to be using a lot of those Starlight Shards. But I kind of appreciate Revenant as a little bit more because you've got a little bit more freedom to use some melee weapons, though, you know, there's obviously the meme of the colossal weapons with Revenant. Maybe don't go that route, but there's a little bit more freedom in terms of that. But also the character skill and the ultimate here are definitely more valuable holistically than I think Recluse's. So the character skill allowing you to summon those spirits that can not only have the enemies aggro onto them and like tank damage, they do a decent, not great, but a decent amount of damage on their own, but also they can revive your allies as well and yourself as well. So it's sort of like having almost like an extra Nightfarer on the battlefield in some regard, which is quite nice. And I do really like the ultimate here that does make you invincible and instantly revive all your allies, which is absolutely fantastic for team play. Less valuable in solo play other than making you invincible, but ultimately there's a bit more flexibility in the Revenant's kit, I feel. And I just find that allowing yourself to say use a faith weapon, like if you get say a coded sword or something, you know, you're laughing, but you've got the option to use some melee weapons, but you've also got the seal option. And then I just find that the summons to be just generally across the board significantly stronger than Magic Cocktail and so much more reliable. And that's sort of what tipped Revenant over for me and putting it above Recluse. Next on the list, we have one that I wasn't too happy about putting it here, but I ended up with it. That's Raider. Now, when I originally made this list, Raider was actually third highest. But the more I thought about it and the more I tinkered with it, I think he kind of fits somewhere here in this like middle range for a couple of reasons. So the positives here are having the S strength scaling, and then, you know, you can use any of those heavy weapons and just dealing obscene amounts of damage. But then you've got those unique attack animations for the colossal weapons, the great axe and the great hammers, which is kind of fine. Like it's an okay move set, but you know, the basic ones are actually kind of better, but you don't really get a choice here. Retaliate is a fantastic skill to tank damage, and then you hit back with those brilliant staggers to stagger enemies. And it's a pretty solid ultimate as well. Not great for reviving, but also just generally good for the overall damage output that it can do, plus that extra stagger. But there's a lot of sort of just okayness about the Raider's kit. So one of them being the slow attack animations from the colossal weapons, the great axes and the great hammers, because of his unique attack animation set that he has compared to the other heroes. This means that sometimes your damage output's quite slow, even though the stagger potential here is great. So in group play, it's fine, but in solo, it can be a little bit annoying because it takes so long to get some of these attacks off. And sometimes you might be better using some of these other weapons that are strength scaling just for the overall damage. The passive here is just kind of average because it's an extension of his skill that, you know, basically gives him poise when you're in Retaliate and some additional survivability, which just kind of feels like the skill itself. So it's not really unique in that regard, which is a bit disappointing. And because you're also sort of pigeonholed into using these larger weapons as well. So he's got a lot going for him, and he definitely is quite valuable to use. And I personally have a ton of fun playing Raider, also some fantastic skins. But I just think that when you crunch the numbers and push comes to shove, these next 4 Nightfarers are just a little bit more flexible and a little bit more damage output and have a little bit more survivability. And that is why he finishes here. Also, if you like what we do here, consider hitting that like button or subscribing, or the membership program. For just $1, you can get early access to videos like this and all of my other guides, build videos, and those cheeky long form essays we do. Plus, there are other benefits like members only channels in the Discord, merch, and more. So if you like what we do here, please consider hitting that join button or subscribing, as it helps me more than you know. But enough of that, back to the video. Next on the list, we're now in the top 4, starting at 4th, is Duchess. Duchess is a funny one because she's got so much cool stuff in her kit, but it sort of doesn't overly work entirely perfectly. But I think that's intentional, because if her attributes actually made sense, she would probably be the most broken character in the game. So what I mean by that is actually her highest attribute is intelligence, which makes 0 sense, being that she is primarily like a dexterity, like dagger wielding character, but she has a magic dagger, so it kind of makes sense there. But she's also got no way to generate FP, so even if you wanted to do, say, an intelligence star focused build, she's got a similar sort of issue that Revenant has. She's also got really low arcane, which isn't great for status build up, and status build up is fantastic for the daggers and the katanas, those sort of weapons that you might want to use very regularly with her overall kit. Now, interestingly, some of those negatives are outweighed by just the overall damage potential of restage. So restage is one of the best skills in the game, not only because, say, if you do, a big chunk of damage, you can just restage that and have that chunk of damage play again, but also it applies the status effect again. So that same status effect build up, if you've been building up poison and you apply restage, it does that additional build up as well. So even though her arcane skill is quite low, so she doesn't have very fast status build up, restage really makes up for that because it allows you to build that up a little bit faster, but also the damage potential of restage and being able to trigger those status effects regularly. And then she's got that passive dodge ability from her passive as well, which is absolutely fantastic and one of the best dodges in the game. The downside being obviously her very squishy, like a low amount of health. So, you do struggle sometimes because, if you take damage, especially in solo, she's quite hard for solo unless you're like an absolute god tier dodger. If you do make 1 or 2 mistakes, especially in those early levels, you'll basically get one shot. The ultimate is why she finishes sort of in the middle here, because her ultimate actually is kind of one of the worst in the game. Like, becoming invisible really is only useful maybe to res allies or just to reposition sometimes. But ultimately though, some of the other ultimates that we've already talked about instantly revive allies. This doesn't instantly revive anyone. It just means you drop the boss aggro so that you can revive people that way. Very rarely are you ever actually going to use this in a boss fight against a Night Lord or whatever and be like, oh man, that becoming invisible, totally clutch, absolutely save the day. It doesn't really happen, and there's just better ultimates across the board, especially in these last 3 that we're going to touch on. They just have an overall kit that makes so much sense and that's so valuable. But Duchess does have a lot of great things going for her, so that's why she sits in sort of this middle tier. Now into the top 3, we're going to start with Executor. Executor is number 3 on this list, and it's not for the reason you think it is. It's definitely not because of Sacred Sword, his character skill. Now, the reasons that Executor is fantastic is because of that S-scaling dexterity and S-scaling arcane, which means you've got insane status effect build up and just great overall weapon damage with any dexterity weapon. If you get a Rivers of Blood on this guy, you are just laughing. You just absolutely shred everything. The Katana moveset is also just so good. You've got a decent amount of HP and stamina, and then overall, the kit is solid. The worst part about Executor's kit is definitely actually the passive ability, which is kind of useless. Very rarely do you ever actually trigger a status effect on yourself intentionally, unless you're using seppuku or something to get those buffs. So it kind of happens sometimes. When it does happen, it's like, oh, cool. But overall, it's not a very useful passive ability. The character skill, the deflect, from the Sacred Sword, is quite an interesting one. It's cool as hell. It just looks cool. It's fun to use, but it's just kind of bad, especially in solo play, because you're just kind of deflecting for days with no damage output. Now obviously you can break their stance, so then you can follow up with critical hits, then you do a little bit of chip damage when you do charge it up and use that Sacred Sword. But overall, it's not great. It would be so much better if it did a little bit of chip damage when you are deflecting, just to feel like you're doing something, not just standing there waiting for ages. It's good in group play for sure to tank bosses so your other homies can attack them. It gives you extra survivability because of that. I've used that a ton in fights where, say, there's multiple enemies, you pull one of the bosses away, you just deflect for days while your allies wail on the other guy, then they come over and help you once they're down. Really works in team play because of that, and it is a flexible ability that you can use it that way and sort of support yourself in solo play as well, but it just doesn't have enough damage output. The ultimate though, the beast mode, is actually incredible because it's essentially like a get out of jail free card. If you're stuck and you just need an oh shit button, you can hit that, you get all your health back. You can use the Roar as a good AoE ability. It's fantastic to clear trash. It's solid against bosses. The only thing is that you just have to be careful not to, get staggered out of it or lose all your health instantly, which can happen sometimes, but it's got great damage. And if you actually use the skill to wind up at the end and, use that damage to finish off the ability as well, it's fantastic just to keep yourself alive in solo, in group play. And it looks cool. You can't get past the cool factor of Executor. He just looks cool, has really cool abilities and skills and stuff. So he kind of fits here in this top 3. All right, pause the video. I want you to tell me who's going to be number 1 and number 2 in the comments, and tell me if you get the order the right way. Also, just let me know, which order you put all of the Nightfarers in the comments down below. All right, so number 2 on this list is actually Wilder. For a couple of reasons, he's absolutely fantastic. Both of these characters are essentially the best in the game for a few reasons. So one, Wilder has the best passive ability in the game, Sixth Sense, which is just a free revive or death save. It's just a free Wending Grace that resets every time you go to a grace site. So you can use this 100 100 times in a run, as long as you reset it at a grey site in between each fight. Absolutely fantastic to keep yourself alive and survive attacks that, we all make mistakes, and you'll use this more than you realize. And every time it triggers, you're like, oh wow, I was going to die there. Like it's actually so good. Now he's also got pretty solid attributes here with like the A strength and the B dex, so mostly quality weapons, but it also gives him the freedom to use a lot of weapon variety. Like you can kind of use anything you come across, like katanas and scythes and whatever you find, you're free to use. But greatswords are his main strength, and the benefit is that there are so many good greatswords in Elden Ring Nightreign that you've got a ton of flexibility, because you do want to use the greatswords because of claw shot being the ability, which is a fantastic movement ability, but also you can buff it with that relic to get not only an extra charge if you do get lucky with your relics, but also that greatsword follow-up, which adds fire damage and just is a solid stagger damage attack. Like on basically every run, it's so easy to find a greatsword that fits the boss's weakness or fits like the playstyle you're going for, which is like just what makes Wilder so good. Now his ultimate also is actually one of the best in the game, just for overall raw damage potential, especially when you charge it up and you can buff it to have like that molten lava effect on the ground. Just really high stagger potential. In solo play, you'll basically get a crit after this every single time you use the charged ability. So you're getting not only the damage from that, but then also the damage from a free critical hit as well. Plus, like the iframes are fantastic to avoid damage, and you can use it in the non-charged form if you want to recharge it faster or you want to use it more regularly. That's just kind of what makes him really good. It's just the flexibility of how you use claw shot as a movement ability or as a damage ability with the follow-up greatsword attack, or his ultimate to charge it or not charge it. And then you've got the free revive with Sixth Sense that you can use every time you go through a grey site, plus the flexibility in weapon usage. You just never feel bad having a Wilder with you, especially a good Wilder in like group play, because you can kind of tank some damage, you can deal really solid damage yourself, you can match enemy weaknesses. Great in group play, great in solo play, just a fantastic character across the board. And that leaves us with number 1, which is my personal favorite character in the game, but I do also legitimately think he's one of the best in the game, and that's Eye, for a couple of reasons. Namely, marking is probably the best character skill in the game. Like, if you use it correctly, right, I see a lot of people use it just as a movement ability, and it's really not a movement ability. It is a movement ability in that you get the iframes from it, and you can use it to like, dodge through enemies, but marking enemies is actually why this is so good. So when an enemy is marked, it debuffs them so they take more damage, but when you pop that marking, you get like that unique stance break animation, so it stops the enemy from attacking for a period of time. You can't follow up with a crit, but even still, that just staggers them for a longer period of time, and then it does a large amount of health damage as well, very similar to like a bleed pop. Now the benefit here is that you can then just mark them again and just do it again and just do it again and do it again over and over again. And then when enemies charge at you, you can like use the marking skill to dodge through them, build it up, and just constantly keep breaking this. This makes it fantastic for solo play. One, because you can attack enemies from range, and then you can use this to constantly stagger them. And then also in group play, because it's just free damage that you can constantly do. And while the marking effect is active on the target, they do take more damage, so your allies are doing more damage. It's just fantastic for that alone. And then you've got the passive ability that gives you extra drops and an extra chance of finding a rare gear from all the trash mobs and everything that you fight. And then you've got the ultimate ability, which is a free clear of like all the trash in front of you. It does really good damage to bosses and normal enemies, great stagger. Plus, if you combo this with marking, it almost guarantees that it's going to pop that mark. So you get extra damage from, say, just the ultimate ability and then the popping of marking as well, plus like the stagger off that. Really fantastic. The downside to Eye is really only that low HP. But the way it's kind of outweighed here, I think, is because you can attack from range with a bow. And it also allows you to move quite fast throughout the world, because you don't necessarily have to get up to enemies and fight them in melee range. You can always fight in range. Obviously, bosses, for some reason, just auto-target Eye in every encounter ever, but you can defeat enemies quite quickly because you can just quickly like sprint into an area and just like zoom around in a circle and kill everything and then move off to the next area without having to run up to things. So I always find that Eye is just fun because of that. And if you asked me before Elden Ring Nightreign came out, would the bow character be the best character in the game? I'd be like, absolutely not. But his kit is so flexible. There's a lot of good bows in the game. Also, there's some fantastic relics that you can use. Like, I've touched on it in my relic video and obviously my I video as well. But you've got that relic that you get from the final boss in the game where you can just constantly switch between bows and add an elemental effect and add the additional damage that it does. Plus, there's some fantastic other relics as well. There's a relic you can get an extra charge for marking. So you've got 2 charges similar to like Wildest Claw Shot. So you've got additional iframes from being able to dodge again. Plus, you've got 2 so you can always have marking active on the target. It's just fun. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. He's just fun. I really like using the bow, and his overall kit's just fun. Being able to move around, like the finesse of it. I've just really enjoyed I like right from day one, and he was the first character I played. And let me know your list of where you would rank all 8 Nightfarers in the comments down below. I do apologize for my voice. I have lost it a little bit since returning from Summer Game Fest, but hopefully it comes back soon before we get into Death Stranding content. Thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.